Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry Peacock, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Peacemaker. It was called Back to the Suture, and as the episode starts, there's a flashback to 3 years ago, in which Harcourt and Economos attend Rick Flag Jr.'s funeral. Rick Flag Sr. sits behind Harcourt and asks her if she knows who killed his son. Of course, she's not at liberty to discuss that. And Flag Sr. tells her that his son loved her, and that while he did love a lot of women, he loved her as a friend and more. He then excuses himself, claiming that he has to interact with people that his son hated. Harcourt then vows that the person behind his son's murder will see justice. In the present, at the park, Chris is on his way to meet Harcourt. Of course, at the same time, Bordeaux, Vega, Klein, and Rick Sr. are stationed around the park, keeping a close eye on the proceedings. Perched above the park is Judo Master, with his gun trained on Chris as he later enters the park. He isn't supposed to shoot to kill, of course, only to incapacitate Chris with a dart. Chris winds his way through the crowded park, and when he makes it to Harcourt, he grabs the mic she's wearing and throws it away and positions himself away from Judo Master's aim. She reminds him that she used her warning word in their last exchange, copacetic, meaning for him not to come. But he then asks her if the night on the boat, when they were together, meant anything to her. All she has to do is answer this question and he'll leave. We then see Argus agents slowly moving in, and Harcourt begging Chris to leave, but when he doesn't, she finally just answers her question with a no. Judo Master takes his shot, but Chris uses Klein as a shield. The dart knocks Klein unconscious. Chris grabs Klein's gun after slinging the agent over his shoulders and points the weapon at the encircling Argus agents. Bordeaux informs the general that she has Chris in her crosshairs with her, bionic eye, and that this time, if she makes the shot, it'll kill him. At that point, the general orders her to take him out. But Harcourt then barrels through all the agents, kicking Chris before wrestling him to the ground. She then puts him in a sleeper hold and he falls unconscious. Elsewhere, Adebayo and Adrian sit on the cabin porch, and Adebayo talks with a potential customer on the phone who's interested in her security services, an ad for which he found in Pro Soldier. But the man asks some weird questions. For example, one of them is, can she do Greek? They agree on a meeting time and place the following evening at 8 p.m. And Adebayo is really happy. She thinks she has her first customer, but Adrian bursts her bubble, informing her that her new customer thinks she's a prostitute. He then reassures her that he doesn't kill sex workers, only the Johns. Meanwhile, Economos is at his desk at Argus when Chris is brought in. Harcourt pulls Economos aside and asks about Bordeaux. After all, she tried to kill Chris, and Economos explains that Bordeaux was in a crash that left the majority of her body mangled, and that Argus paid to give her cybernetic body parts, that she's mostly robot. Kind of like Darth Vader.
More machine now than
Woman.
twisted and evil.
Anyway, Harcourt urges Economos to book Chris into the system. That way he'd be a real arrest, and otherwise he'd disappear. The reason that would happen is because all of this is about revenge for the general. He wants Chris to pay for killing his son. Economos doesn't want to do it at first, but he eventually agrees to do it. In the interrogation room, the general orders Bordeaux and Fleury to leave. He also orders them to shut the blinds and turn off the cameras. Chris tries to apologize for killing his son, but the general isn't interested in an apology. He starts to beat the crap out of Chris, ordering him to fight back, but Chris won't, just taking punch after punch. Economos, meanwhile, creates the arrest record for Chris, and Bordeaux catches him in the act. She demands to know why he would do such a thing, and then tells the general that Chris has been booked into the system. Later, the eagle hunter, Red St. Wild, injects a dead mouse with poisonous serum meant to kill Eagly. He tosses the mouse out in front of the cabin and waits for Eagly to take the bait. Adebayo and Adrian leave to go get Chris, and they inform Eagly of this before he has a chance to eat it. But during this, a fox takes the mouse, and Eagly follows it into the woods, trying to get it back, but the fox eats the mouse and immediately dies. This causes St. Wild to whip out a really big elephant gun and head out to shoot Eagly down. Adebayo and Adrian pull up to Argus to see Harcourt and Economos helping Chris hobble out to the car. Judo Master watches this from afar and alerts the general that he has eyes on Chris. Harcourt and Economos inform Adebayo and Adrian that they booked Chris into the system so that the general had to release him because he couldn't send him to jail looking like that. Bordeaux visits the general in his office. She seemingly has reservations about the handling of Chris. The general insists this isn't solely about revenge. They have to resolve the dimensional rift crisis before it turns into the Metropolis incident, referring to what happened in Superman. He says he has the best interests of the people he serves in mind. Bordeaux says she doesn't like the idea of mistreating or killing Chris. On the way back to the cabin, Chris explains that Harcourt knocked him unconscious, making it easier for Argus to capture him. He thinks that for her, it was always about getting her job back. He doesn't talk to Adrian at all while recounting his experience, which irritates Adrian. Next, St. Wiles takes a shot at an eagle, thinking that it was eagly, and takes it out of the sky. At the same time, Adebayo and Adrian drop Chris off at the cabin. Chris claims he wants to be alone. Judo Master has tailed them there, and he watches from the woods. Chris calls for Eagly, who doesn't come. St. Wild picks up the dead eagle, only for Eagly to swoop in. And he isn't alone. We see several other eagles assembled beside him. St. Wild looks up to see Eagly's eyes glow, and the eagle design he etched into the sand in last week's episode materialized behind Eagly's head. Eagly lifts his head as the other eagles descend on St. Wild, ripping him to shreds. Then Chris sits in his cabin writing a letter to Adebayo. He asks her to say goodbye to the others for him. Judo Master then calls Fleury as he moves closer to the cabin. And in turn, Fleury informs the general that they've located Chris. Eagly returns to the cabin and presents Chris with St. Wild's severed finger. And Chris opens the helmet-shaped device used for transporting and closing the extra-dimensional room and activates it to close the room behind him and Eagly, because they're moving into the parallel dimension, apparently permanently. He does, of course, leave the letter for Adebayo and the device. Before stepping into the room, he texts Adebayo, and once he and Eagly leave, Judo Master enters the cabin. He again calls Fleury, but the static from the extra-dimensional room interferes with the call. Judo Master then leaves a note of his own before also stepping through into the other dimension, and the room closes. Adebayo and Adrian speed back to the cabin to find the interdimensional portal gone. Adebayo reads Judo Master's note, realizing that he pursued Chris into the other dimension. Over in the other dimension, Chris washes the blood off his face. He's in his room at his father's mansion, and Keith reveals that there's a kaiju downtown tearing things up. He asks about Eagly being there, and Chris claims Eagly is a rescue eagle and now his sidekick. He then suits up to be a hero with his dad and brother. At the same time, General Flagg, Bordeaux, and the Argus team discover that the interdimensional portal and Chris are both gone. Then Adebayo and Adrian reunite with Harcourt and Economos in Adebayo's hotel room. She reads the letter that Chris left her. In it, he says that he's tried to make up for his mistakes, but hasn't been able to, and that he's tired of feeling like a failure, so he's moving to a dimension where his brother's alive and his father isn't abusive, where he's going to be a hero, and where he's going to start to share life with the other Harcourt. He suggests in the letter that Adebayo, Harcourt, and Economos take the device to Argus to make a deal for themselves. Over in the parallel dimension, we see that he, his brother, and his father are carrying out heroics beside Eagly. Harcourt wonders how the device works. Adebayo explains what she noticed when Chris operated it, and they decide that they're not, in fact, going to return it to Argus. They're going to head to the parallel universe to save Chris. Economos, of course, is reluctant to cause more trouble, but, he's going to go along. Adrian hopes that he'll meet another version of himself there. Finally, we see in the other universe that Chris and his father and brother are successful at defeating the kaiju, and Chris goes to Argus headquarters to have a reunion with that version of Harcourt. And that's where the episode ended. This episode has probably been the strongest of the season, where we see Chris choose to stay in the alternate dimension where his father and brother are alive, and where he can be with what is his ideal version of Harcourt. And it seems like what we're supposed to take from this is that he's refusing to face his trauma in favor of a temporary solution versus really healing. And it seems like the show is using the concept of the alternate dimension not just as, a plot device, but as a means to explore Chris's journey of self-healing and the choices he makes when confronted with, his trauma. What I want to know is what's got Harcourt all messed up the way she is? What's her damage? I'm wondering if they're going to explore that. I mean, I think she's full of crap when she said she doesn't have feelings for Chris. It just seems like she won't let herself give in to them because she's afraid of something, either of being hurt or hurting other people or just failing at a relationship. And I say that even though we've seen that she was getting it on with Rick Flag Jr., but it seemed like a casual thing. I think we can be sure that she does have some feelings for Chris, that he does matter to her, at least somewhat, because she, signaled to him that there was a trap. Then she jumped in to keep him from being shot. And then she even goes rogue, not only to get Chris put in the system at Argus to, protect him, but then she makes off with the portal to help the others get Chris back. So I have to ask whether her seeming compliance with Flag through all of this, in trying to help him capture Chris, was a way for her to try to control the situation rather than just let it play out wildly. That is to say, is she trying to get close to Argus and close to Flag in order to have her role in Chris's fate? I think that might be what's going on. And it may be that she doesn't even realize it. This begs the question of whether Chris is even making the right choice of which Harcourt to pursue. Never mind how, the alternate dimension allows him to escape reality of his trauma or what have you. Is his idealized version of Harcourt really the version that he should want to be with when the other one seems to be a much better person, even if she's messed up and currently emotionally unavailable? I think that's a question that Chris is going to end up asking himself sooner rather than later in the next couple of episodes. There's also now this whole new dimension about Eagly. Like, what's going on there? Is he really like a manifestation of the Great Spirit, which is a huge thing in Native American culture? And if so, why is he so loyal, particularly to Chris? Is Chris like some kind of prime being, kind of like Wolverine in the MCU, whose destiny is pivotal to that world or that dimension? Or is it just happenstance that he took to Chris? We don't, really know. But they've really, put together a good show this season, just like last season. And there's some big questions to be answered and some big, I want to say, emotional beats that are going to end up getting worked through, I think. So it's just really, really a good show. And of course, it's still funny at the same time. And there's plenty of action and, raucous stuff happening. So it's really a good show. I'm really enjoying it. But that's really it. So I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.